everyone. Hello, and welcome back to Random Prompt Stories. Today, which I am recording on the 8th, so I've been ahead of schedule. Um, Today marks the first day in a long time where I have finished a story. Yep. Um, so this will be the seventh story for Random Prompt Stories. And as a reminder, this month's prompt was one day in a sleepy rural town. A group of tourists create a set of dominoes. As always, the reading document will be in the description. Um, but without further ado, let's get into it. So, this is the seventh story, Harvest Season. The bus came in the early morning. 28 people got off, already chattering and taking pictures of the landscape. To everyone else around them, it was about as out of the ordinary as things come. They weren't aware of anything that made their small town a tourist location, other than the lush hills that could be seen anywhere else in the state. Of course, they knew what it meant. This was one of the last truly rural places in this part of Missouri, with almost every other town and village having been bloated with tourist money. Industry, sure, but not the peaceful life that many of the locals had enjoyed for so long. Progress had come for them at last. The tourists oohed and awed over quaint local shops, clogging up foot traffic in the busier areas of town. Most of the townsfolk, especially the older folks, looked over the crowd with disdain, while some of the younger shop owners took time to subtly change their price tags. It was near chaos for a while. The tourists moved this way and that, following each other subconsciously like a herd. Eventually, after several overpriced sales and uncomfortable conversations with the locals, the group settled down around town, whining and trying to find a good place for lunch. Most of the locals cooked at home, so the only real restaurant was a small family-owned bar and inn near the main mountain road. Tourists laughed and cheered when they saw each other, eventually filling up the bar with conversation over how much homemade cheese they got from the market. None of them really noticed or cared that 28 people filled the place near to bursting. No one noticed the few townsfolk leaving their own tables and drinks, rolling their eyes at the newcomers. Only one local stayed behind. He was one of the oldest people in town, respected out of deference to his age, but was seen as a bit odd by everyone. He had seen and told the stories of how this place grew from a little farmstead, expanding little by little as more people set up shop in the fertile lands nearby. He also told them he worked as a very good winemaker, but now all he did was play dominoes at a small table in the back of the bar. Even then, rumors circulated, especially among the fearful children who avoided him. They said his dominoes, which were carved from bone, were made from people who crossed him in the past. Most of the kids avoided him, unless he was telling a story. The tourists, however, had no such respect for the old man's space. Two tourists, looking for seating, decided to pull up chairs to the elder's table. Mind if we sit? They asked. Godfrey, the old man creaked, raising one cracked eyelid to regard the strangers. When they didn't reply, he took a hoarse breath, saying, "That's my name." The tourists looked at each other. "Oh, sorry," one said. "I guess we should have asked." Godfrey's eyes widened. "Oh, I thought you did," he said, motioning them to a table. "I'm as deaf as a mule these days. Forgive an old man." The tourists sat, and the old man launched into the last time he ever saw a stranger stay in their village. "He was a merchant, and not a very good one, I might add," he said, performing what may have been a wink. "Of course, he wouldn't have come up here if he didn't get kicked out of somewhere else." He gave a laugh that sounded a bit like an asthma attack, and his captive audience chuckled along politely. "So anyway," he continued, after catching his breath, "he sold me this game here. Picked it up pretty fast," he said, tapping his temple. "This was when I was a younger man. All the gears turned back in those days." One of the tourists eyed the dominoes. "What are they made of?" he asked at last. "They don't seem like wood, but it's not ivory, right?" Godfrey squinted one eye mischievously. "Right you are. These here are bone dominoes. I'm told they are bone dice, so these are the same craftsmanship, I would think, he said with a grin. After a bit of food and a few more stories, the tourist chairs began to push back. It was time to move on to the bus, on to the next stop. The old man wished his two companions farewell, saying, I think we'll be together again sometime soon. Good luck on your trip. The group walked its way to the bus, which was parked by a field outside of town. Some were stumbling already, and there was a lot of chatter about where their next stop might be. Someone made a joke about the next place hopefully having a McDonald's, which got a laugh out of most everyone. This was back country, hardly anything like that for miles in any direction. As they walked, no one commented on the now empty streets. In fact, no absence was noted until somebody caught a glimpse of a pole in the middle of the field they parked next to. The tourists squinted. Hadn't there been a scarecrow there earlier? Before they could ask, a gasp broke out in front of the herd. The first person climbing into the bus was met with the corpse of their driver, throat cut as she sat in her seat. The blood had congealed, but a spray could still be seen on the windshield. This had not been a quiet death. It was then people started to notice that no one was around. Even looking back where they came from yielded nothing. The streets were empty. They began to argue over what to do, some pulling out their phones to see no signal anywhere. Some strode off back to town, looking for answers, some down the road for cell service. Some stayed by the bus, debating it would be worth it to try and get the body out to get away. They were the first to go. A rustling in the field behind them heralded their terror. 10 were at the bus, and they all looked to see what was coming towards them. It tore through them like a blender. The people heading into town didn't even hear the screams. Another 10 walked around, calling for help. Their calls were answered when they went down a side street, one that was avoided by the locals, but that didn't seem dangerous to the tourists. The figure they followed down the path cornered them all, ripping them to shreds. The final 8 almost escaped. If they had kept walking, they might have found someone with enough local knowledge to get them out of there before it was too late. But one of them found a cell signal at the edge of a field and figured there might be better service further in. The last to go in heard rustling where her compatriots had ventured, and called out to make sure it was safe. When there was no response, she began to run. A glance behind her was the last thing she saw. A figure made of straw and cloth, scythe blades where its hands should be, and a face as blank as the cloudless sky. Back in town, Godfrey set his last domino down. He wasn't playing, not right now. He'd grown tired of this set and figured he'd use it one last time before he'd make a new one. Smiling to himself, he looked over the pieces, all played out perfectly as he planned. 28, a perfect number. This town would remain where it was, as he remembered it, and not a single new bone would be wasted. All right. Well, that was the 7th story. Bit of a shorter one compared to some of the other ones I've written in the past, but this is a short story podcast. I don't think it matters too much. So, uh, yeah, like I said last time, thank you for anyone who stuck with me for this long. Um, I mean, I hope you're enjoying still, and I'm really hoping that I continue with this. Uh, it's a nice little project to do on the side of grad school and, writing longer pieces. It can get monotonous at times. So thank you very much. Um, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. I have to get the random prompt for next time, otherwise this whole thing doesn't work. Alright, give me the Ghiblis. On a Halloween night, a bunch of campers find a creature from the depths of the ocean. Huh, that seems cool. Um, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Alrighty. Now for real this time. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.